Ladies and gentlemen, we are privileged to have been enriched by the insights into the core values that form the bedrock of Whizible. Vishwas's words have illuminated our path and reinforced our commitment to these guiding principles. We extend our heartfelt gratitude to him for sharing his wisdom and vision with us. And now, as we delve deeper into the essence of organizational values, it gives me great pleasure to introduce another visionary leader, Mr. Monish Darda. Mr. Monish Darda is an acclaimed leader in the software industry. He is a visionary leader who embodies the very essence of leadership and values at Icertis. With over 30 years of unparalleled expertise, Monish has not only shaped technology landscapes, but also steered teams with a steadfast commitment to excellence and integrity. As a leader, his commitment to Icertis' values permeates every decision, interaction, and strategy. His guidance, fueled by fairness, openness, respect, teamwork, and execution, propels Icertis and its teams towards unprecedented success. Now, why is he here today? You may ask. Well, his remarkable work in crafting a values framework that has resonated with many organizations is truly commendable. Mr. Darda's framework encapsulates principles that align closely with Whizible's vision and its aspirations. As he takes the stage, we anticipate insights that will undoubtedly enrich our understanding of the values that drive exceptional organizations. This is the very reason we have invited him to speak on the subject close to his heart and very relevant to what Vishwas just introduced. His talk is titled Culture Propels the Organization Growth. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in a warm welcome to Mr. Monish Darda on the stage.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, Vishwas. I really appreciate you reaching out and requesting me to do this. Values are very core to my heart, to Icertis, to Icertians. And one of the things we've seen is that they have a lot of impact. They have a lot of impact on how a company grows. And I loved what Vishwas said. You know, if you have to grow fast, you can do it alone. But if you have to go long, if you have a long journey, if you have to have an enduring company, you have to go together. And this togetherness comes from three things. When you feel you are part of a family, whether in your personal lives or in your professional lives, you feel part of the family because you are surrounded by people who you have a rapport with. When we say frequencies hote hain, right? There's something which is common. There's also this feeling about, hey, the moral values, the ethics, the way people will behave in a certain situation is very similar. That's why you like people around you who are very similar in terms of their moral integrity, in terms of how they behave in a certain situation, what their reaction is going to be in a certain situation. And the third thing, which is also very important, is that when things go adverse, when things go wrong, how do they behave, how do they come together, how do they actually take that opportunity in the face of adversity to find their strength. And these three things actually come from a very strong set of values in your mind. So if you think about individuals, if you think of ourselves, obviously, you know, we would love to believe ourselves that, hey, we have values, we have a set of ethics, we are good people. Right? Generally, nobody thinks I'm a bad person, right? Hopefully, in the room. Right? If someone does, I would love to hear how you think about yourself. Now, when you think about this as a company, though, it becomes very hard to bring people together and say, hey, how do I actually bring people together? What's the focal point? How do I focus people on the things that are credible, that everybody believes in? And that's where organizational values come in. And for Icertis, for our growth for the last 12 years, these values have been very important. they have set the culture of the company. They have set the culture of how we behave with people, how we as founders, Samir, who is our CEO and my co-founder, and I behave with people. What kind of mistakes when we do them, because everybody does mistakes, how do we recover from them? I think that's been a huge learning in terms of, these values coming to help when you have to take a hard decision. Right? When everything is going well, values are great. So there's very interesting, Samir has a very interesting quote about values that I love, that really resonated. There's Pygmalion or My Fair Lady, Thi Fularani in Marathi. There's a very famous play, and there's a situation there where there's this lady who is selling flowers, and there are these two professors who have a bet, who say that, hey, it's a lady, someone who knows manners and how to behave and how to talk, is by training or is it by upbringing? That's the bet they have. And so they're trying to convince the girl who's selling flowers to come and give them an opportunity to teach her, right? And so they're offering her money. And her dad comes in, her father comes in and says, hey mate, what are you doing? And they say, no, we are talking to your daughter and we'd love to give her money and train her and help her become a lady. And he says, go away. You guys are troubling my daughter, go away. And they say, oh, here is 50 pounds. And, I'd love to do that. And so he snaps up the money. And the other person, the other professor says, hey, you were just talking about, you won't allow your daughter to go anywhere and so on. And you saw the money, don't you have any morals? And he says, I can't afford them. Right? It's very simple, but very thought-provoking, because this is when you need your morals. This is when you need your values. When things are not going well. If things are going well, you can afford them. But when they're not going well, you have to make sure that you can afford them. And that's why it's a journey. That's why it's a journey where values become important over the years, where they have to be reinforced with people, where people have to be told, including us, including founders, that hey, values are important, values are critical. Without values, you cannot build a sustaining, long-term, enduring company or an organization, or for that matter, a family. Right? Because these situations are not very different in terms of what we also, kind of hit in our personal lives. And that's why it's been a very interesting learning for us in terms of why organizational values are important, why they are needed, and why they have to be emphasized. Our biggest validation actually came from one of our board meetings 3 years ago. And usually board meetings are kind of at least at our level. We have one of the ex-CFOs and CIOs of Microsoft on the board. There is a person who was on the advisory board of Facebook and Twitter and Salesforce. So there are these very accomplished people who have had a long background in software, very successful people. And so they were, we were discussing something, this was kind of just at the beginning of the pandemic, so we were all virtual. And one of the board members said that, hey, I've told all of my portfolio companies that this is what Icertis the Icertis values are, and we would love to actually have them follow those values. That was very revealing. That was actually telling us that it was not just us internally in the company, it was also externally the people who invested in the company, the directors, the people who are looking at the company outside in. They have been influenced by what we do, by how we actually kind of embellish our values, how we put them together, how we actually live them. And that was very revealing, because it said that it actually made a difference. It has actually made a difference in our lives, in our investors' lives, in our customers' lives, in our partners' lives, and of course all our associates. The interesting part of this is that if I ask any Icertian today what our values are, they can do this like that. They can remember, because I think in the introduction said it's forte: fairness, openness, respect, teamwork, and execution. It comes like this because, first of all, we have an acronym. Second, we kind of reiterate, as Vishwas mentioned, every presentation begins with a slide with values. All hands, every meeting begins with the values. Every interview has a culture interview and a values interview. So we have culture and value interviewers for the longest time, not when we became bigger, but we were about 100 people company. You train people, including ourselves, to evaluate people based on our values. Because we wanted people around who we could empathize with, who we could think of as family. And the big thing about that is to make sure that you live those same values. Now, the other part of it is, and that's the last one that I'm going to say, just to give you some food for thought, is Whizible has values, and I actually now, Vishwas, you can test me, I can actually go through them without looking at that board, right? So it's the power of having an acronym, right? It's very, the recall is very, very good. But are these values better than Icertis' values, or Icertis' values better than Whizible's values? That's a very interesting question. Right? What I've seen, and one of the things, one of our customers, one of our first and largest customers, Johnson & Johnson, they have a credo, right? Johnson & Johnson is a pharmaceutical company. They manufacture all kinds of drugs, cancer drugs, etc. Plus, of course, in many other products. I was talking to the chief procurement officer, and he said, Monish, we have this credo. Just like you started your presentation with values, with a value slide, we start our presentations with a credo. Okay? And the credo essentially says, how Johnson & Johnson is invested in making sure that they deliver the right kind of drug to the well-being of humanity and so on. So there's you can look it up. It's a very interesting thing. What I realized at that time was it actually defines how you build the company. So the culture of the company, the people you kind of bring together, defines what those values are. They're just words to a very interesting way of thinking, to a very interesting way of living, to a very interesting way of doing business. And this enables you to bring people together. This enables you to actually hold that company together, whether it's a pandemic or whether you're launching the 23rd version of your product. It comes together at every phase in your journey, and it actually helps you bind. It's a catalyst. It's also a thing that will allow you to do what is one of my very interesting and something that's very close to my heart, called anti-fragility, right? So anti-fragility essentially means that in the face of adversity, you not only endure, you not only face that adversity, but you actually find opportunities to grow in that adversity. How do you take the situation of a pandemic and how do you make it work for you? In a bad situation, extremely bad in some cases, how do you make that work for you? And these values actually help you do that. And I think that is the power of values. That is probably my best example for these 15 minutes in terms of what these values would mean. I'll conclude by saying that I'm glad, Vishwas and team, Whizible, that you've actually gone through this. I looked at the collage, actually I walked out and did look at the collage. It's heartwarming to see how people express themselves, how people think about them and how they're passionate about it. Make this, the seeds that you sow, make this grow, make sure that you don't forget these. Make sure you make them simple to remember. Make sure you do remember them and make sure you emphasize them. More importantly, make sure you use them in your everyday life. Because if you do, nothing can stop you from success. Well, that's all I had. Thank you so much. And thank you for listening patiently to me. Congratulations.
Thank you so much, Monish, for enlightening us about organizational values. we all read organizational values, but it's always very important that leaders come and talk about it, and we all listen to it, and we all, I think, should be really thankful that we had the privilege of hearing it right from the horse's mouth. Thank you once again for putting so much emphasis on organizational values and telling all about it with examples as how Icertis has manifested it not only in the organizational structure but employees, customers, partners, and as Whizible is making its orbit shift to grow across geographies, I'm sure these values are guiding principles, and I'm sure as all the employees and partners of Whizible, as they climb up and go to the office every day, they would try their best to adhere to these values. Thank you so much, Monish, once again.